Hello and welcome. My name is Vinces, and in this video we're going to use React to build an image preview that you can use in your own projects. We will read the image contents from a selected file, automatically scale it to fit the image on the screen, and we will add zoom in and zoom out logic. So let's get started. First, we're gonna set up your React project. If you already have it set up, great, you can skip this step. If you don't, I will show you how to set it up using Vite. Go to Vite.js.tab. Get started, follow the instructions for npm. Copy and paste it into your terminal, and then let's replace Vue with React.JS. Then also give your project a name. I'm gonna call it image preview. Press enter. So we have a new project set up. Let's open it up in VSCode. So here we have our new project. Let's open the terminal and install the packages. Run npm install. You should have a project set up with Vite and TypeScript. Next, run npm install ESLint. And D stands for development dependencies. So you should have ESLint in your package.json. Next, we want to create an ESLint config file. Let's create a new file named .eslint.rc. Next, we're going to extend ESLint config from React scripts. Go to npmjs.com and look for a package named ESLint config React app. Install it. And then add extends React app into your ESLint.rc file. Now we can run npm run dev to test if it works. Go to the URL given by Vite, and you should see the start gap. We're not going to be needing this, so let's clean it up. First, let's delete the index CSS file and remove the import from main.tsx. Let's go to app.css file and delete everything inside. Next, go to app.tsx file and remove everything inside your function app. Also remove the imports. Go to your console and run npm install normalize.css. Now import it in main.tsx file. And this resets the styles between all of the browsers, removing all unnecessary margins, setting box sizing, and automatically prefixes all of the properties that need to be prefixed. First, we'll create a file input to upload the image. Go to your app.tsx, add an input with type file. Now we'll need some state to store a selected image. Let's call it preview image source. Now we need to create an onChange handler to handle the file selection. Add onChange on the input and assign a function named handleChangedFile. Now we're going to create the handleChangedFile function. Let's copy that. We can access the selected files on e.target. And it's a list of files, so we can take the first file in the list because it's always going to be only one file. And it can be null. Then if the file is undefined, we will simply return. Otherwise, we're going to set preview image source. I've specified the value as string because it's going to be the base64 data string of the image source, but the selected file is of type file. So we need a way to convert it from file to base64 string. Let's create a new file and let's call it utils.ts. we're going to create a function that converts a file into data string. Let's call it file to data string. It will accept a file, and it will return a promise. Let's set the return type as string. The way you can convert file to data string is by using file reader and then reading the contents as data URL. Let's create a new file reader first. The read as data URL function will read the file and trigger the event listeners where we can access the result. So let's add those event listeners. Let's have one for error and simply reject the promise. Get the resolve and reject functions promise parameters. The reader unload handler will be called when the content is read successfully. And let's resolve the promise with the reader result. We have this error, but that's simply because reader result can be of multiple types. We know it's going to be a string, so let's cast it. Now we can use this function to set the data string. Head back to app.tsx file and call file to data string. Because it's a promise, we first need to await it. And to await, we must convert our function to be async. Don't forget to provide the file. Usually it's also a good idea to handle any errors. So let's wrap it into a try-catch block. We can simply log our error into the console. We can now test if the image contents get selected. Let's wrap our input with a fragment and create a new image element. Let's assign the source to be our preview image source. And just to be sure that the user can only select images, add accept attribute on the input element. Let's test it. So I've selected an image through a file input, and now the image source is the contents of the image that I've selected. We can now move on to create our image preview. Create a new file called imagepreview.tsx and create a new function with the same name. Let's first create the layout of the image preview overlay. We're going to have a div. We're going to have a div container with position fixed. That's going to be our container. Let's give it a class. Next, we'll have our top bar that will contain our close button. We'll also have our image and our bottom bar with the zoom controls. Let's add all of the component props that we'll need. So we'll need an image source and onClose function. Let's accept them. And we can assign our image source to the image. Let's also create a button to close the preview. Head back to the app.tsx file and replace the image with our new component. Let's only show it when we have the image preview set. Pass a handle close click function for onClose handler. And let's define it. Simply, let's set preview image source to undefined. If you refresh the page and select the file again, you will see our close button. Now let's style our actual image preview. Create a new file, go to our app.css file. Let's actually rename it to styles.css. And instead of importing it in app.tsx, let's import it in main.tsx. So that's going to be our styles global for the whole application. Now let's add the styles for our image preview. It should have a fixed position. Let's also give it a background color. I'm gonna give it a gray background color. We'll also set the top, left, bottom, and right positions to 0. There's a shorthand for this called inset. So let's set inset 0. And you can see that our image preview is now overlaying on top of any other content. We also want our image preview to always match the full height of the screen and only the image area to be scrollable if the image gets too big. So let's set height to 100 VH. And we'll also use a flexbox. So let's set the display to flex. And we want to stack vertically, so let's give it a flex direction column. To make it easier to work with, we can set our top bar and bottom bar colors to something else than transparent. So our bottom bar has no contents yet. Let's add the buttons for zoom controls. Go to our image preview and add 3 buttons. One to zoom out, one to zoom in, and the other one to reset the zoom level. Now you can see them at the bottom here. Now we would want the bottom bar to always stay at the bottom. For that we'll need to add a container around our image. Let's create a new div. Move the image inside of it and give the div a class. Now go to your styles and change the preview container into a flexbox. We want it to expand to take up as much space as possible. Let's do flex 1. Now the image container occupies all of this space. We also want the scroll bars to appear only around the image, so let's give the container overflow auto. Now to make it a little bit prettier, let's give the top bar and bottom bar some paddings. I will remove the ugly yellow color, and we can start implementing the image resize logic. Go to your image preview and add state for the scale. We'll want 3 event handlers for zoom in, zoom out, and reset position. Let's create those. We will want to scale the image by 10%. So let's create a constant. We're going to be multiplying scale by this value. Go to your zoom in click handler and add a call to set scale. Let's multiply it by zoom inc. On zoom out, let's divide it by zoom inc. And on reset, simply reset the scale to 1. Assign the handlers. And let's change the static 100% text to respond to our scale changes. We're simply going to multiply it by 100. We need to round it. And you can see that if we click the buttons, they change. Except I mixed them up, and this should be in, and it should be out. So that should work now. Now we need to make the actual image respond to those scale changes. To do that, we need to get the actual size of the image. For that, you need to create a ref. with the type of HTML image element. And assign it to the image. Now you can access the original image size on the image ref. Let's create two new variables for original width and original height. Those are going to be natural width and natural height on the image element. It can be null, so let's set it to 0 initially. And do the same for height. Now we can get the scale dimensions by multiplying scale with the original width and height. Let's create a new object that's going to be our CSS properties that we're gonna assign to the style attribute of the image. Let's assign the width to the scale multiplied by original width. And the same for height. Now assign those to the style of the image. And if you change the scale, and if you set the initial scale to 1 and try resizing, you will see that our duck gets smaller and larger. Now as you see, it always stays at the top left corner. Let's make it centered. We need to give our image a class. Go to your styles, add new styles for preview image, and set the margin to auto. Now our image is centered vertically and horizontally. Ideally, we want our image to initially fit to the screen. Go to your image preview and create a new function called fitImageToScreen. We will need to get the dimensions of the preview container around the image. So let's create a new ref. Let's call it container ref. That's going to be HTML div element. And assign it to the container around the image. In the fitImageToScreen function, create new variables for container and image. Assign the container ref current to the container and image ref to the image. Next, add a type guard for when container and image are undefined. And now, if the image fits on the screen completely, less than 1, such that the image width matches the screen width or image height matches the screen height, whichever is the smallest. So we need to get the container dimensions first. You can do that by calling getBoundingClientRect on the container element. Next, we want to see if the image fits on the screen by dividing the container bounds dimensions with respective image dimensions. So let's create a variable called height ratio. We get it by dividing the container bounds height with the image natural height. Do the same for the width and call it width ratio. Now all that's left is to set the scale. Let's take the minimum of height ratio, width ratio, and 1. And this will fit our image on the screen. We need to call it when we initially mount the image preview component. So let's create a use effect that only gets called on the initial mount. And let's call fitImageToScreen. Also set the state to 0. And as you can see, the scale is set to whatever is necessary to fit the image on the screen. Now instead of calling 1 when we reset the zoom levels, we should simply call fitToScreen. And now if I zoom out, it works. If I zoom in, it works. And if I reset, it fits the image to the screen. So this is already a quite good implementation, but we can improve it a little bit. If we zoom in a lot, you can see that it keeps the focus on the center of the image. But when we reach the point where the scroll bars appear, it changes focus to the top of the image. Ideally, when zooming, we would always want to maintain the focus on the center of the screen. So let's improve that. We can achieve this by adding or subtracting the difference in image size from scroll top and scroll left. So let's create a new function called updateScale. We will need the references to image and container. Now to get the difference in size after scaling the image, we need to save the previous width and height. Now we should set scale. And as you know, in React, the state updates don't take place until the next re-render. However, we can force it by wrapping setScale in flush sync. Flush sync will make sure that our component is re-rendered and DOM is updating with the state resulting from calling setScale. So any code that runs afterwards will have access to the latest DOM. So now image width and image height will be the scaled image size. All that is left is to scroll the container by the difference. We take the new image width, subtract it with previous width, and divide the result by 2 so that it keeps the focus on the center. Do the same for top. And call updateScale instead of calling setScale when zooming in or out. Let's test it to see if it works. So now, as you see, if I zoom in or zoom out, the scroll bar starts at the center. Now if I move it to the top, it will still keep focus on the center. So with our logic done, let's add the final finishing touches to the control buttons. Let's give all of the buttons a class control. Go to the style CSS file. And let's change the background color. Let's make it transparent at first. And when we hover, we want it to be slightly darker than the background color of the image preview. Now let's remove the ugly border and give it a minimum width and height. Great. Now we should also make the text lighter. And it would look good if the borders were rounded. Good. That already looks a little bit better. We should also change the font family. And let's change the font size. Let's change the cursor to pointer. And let's use the flexbox to completely center the text. Now we need our bottom bar and top bar to also use flexbox. Let's move the zoom controls to the center and the close button to the right. Let's fix this align content. It should be align items. And now it looks much better. We should probably also give our reset button some paddings to look better. Let's add another class. Go back to the style CSS and add padding. Good, now it looks much better. Instead of this X, we could also use an icon. Go to heroicons.com. Let's find a close icon. This one's good. Let's copy the SVG, go to your image preview, and replace the X with the SVG. Remove the class, and now you have the proper X. We could also do the same for the plus and minus. Let's copy the plus icon, add it here, remove the class, and the same for the minus. And that's it. There you have it, a working image preview that you can use in your own projects. Hope you enjoyed this tutorial. Leave a like if you did, comment with what should I cover next, and subscribe to stay up to date with my future tutorials. Bye.